Okay, so this is the last chapter of part one of this book. This is called Our Disturbances, Disruptions and Disasters in a Dynamic World. So it goes beyond looking at climate change and talks about how the economy, health, governance, terrorism, financial events or recessions and the so-called black swan events interact together to create these disturbances, disruptions and disasters in a dynamic world. Of course, there are lots of feedbacks as well. Connected with the long-term challenges to the sustainability of our society, there are a variety of events with more immediate impact, although being mere symptoms of the unsustainable situation that we are in. These events disrupt and destroy in various ways the possibilities for development for individuals, communities and societies around the world. Sustainable development demands, therefore, the capacity for managing the risk of a wide range of such events. In the climate business, we are calling them more and more as compound events, which I will talk about a little bit. More dramatic and often sudden initiating events may give rise to highly destructive courses of events, often referred to as emergencies, disasters, or catastrophes. Most scholars use these terms more or less synonymously or to signify quantitative differences in scales, while others assign qualitatively different meaning to them. Regardless of label, these are well understood as posing major threats to sustainable development, and reducing the risk of them is, as mentioned earlier, included as a thematic area and cross-sectoral issue in the outcome document of the Rio Plus 20 conference. So we looked at it. It's just like this text. It's easy to imagine them and easy to plan to avoid them, deal with them, minimize their impact and so on, and yet how to be ready or how to actually alleviate those. If you take the 2008 financial crisis, which was going to threaten the US system, they printed a lot of money and dealt with it with so-called bailouts. Big banks made a lot of money, they returned the money, they just went back into making profits. Auto companies recovered. Many people paid a price in terms of their retirement savings and so on. But that just means that we are back to business as usual. So sustainability then is hung up again. However, our predisposition for the spectacular should not make us forget the many smaller events which on their own might seem relatively insignificant on a larger scale, but whose cumulative impact on society in many ways vastly surpasses the few and dramatic. For instance, in 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami raised the total global death toll and disasters to around 250,000 people, while armed conflict directly killed more than 180,000 people. This is obviously terrible enough, but consider then that it is estimated that almost 900,000 people died from malaria, 1.2 million in road traffic accident, 1.5 million from tuberculosis, 2 million from HIV/AIDS, and 2.2 million from diarrheal diseases that same year. Still, these horrific numbers do not even come close to the top three global causes of death in 2004, namely lower respiratory infections at 4.2 million, cerebrovascular disease at 5.7 million, and ischemic heart disease at 7.2 million. It's not even funny. All such smaller events made together erode sustainable development like water drops on stone. So here are the number of deaths in 2004. You can see these are in millions. Armed conflicts, disasters, and then you start ramping up from malaria, road traffic accidents, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, diarrheal diseases. A big shame, because early warnings and preventable no-regret decisions can really prevent most of these deaths, including malaria. Malaria gets a lot of attention thanks to Bill Gates and so on, but diarrheal diseases are deadly, especially for kids and older people, even in country like India, which has made so much progress, and its neighborhood, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and so on. Lower respiratory infections, cardiovascular disease, and ischemic heart diseases. These are now also directly and indirectly related to air pollution, which is part of our great lively, lifestyles and standards of living, and should be part of sustainability in terms of decreasing air pollution and reducing these numbers by a lot. Of course, there are other underlying causes like obesity and junk food, processed food, and so on that we will not worry about right now. So behind these symptomatic events lay processes of change that continuously reshape risk to sustainable development, adding not only to the complexity of the world but also to its dynamic character. These processes of change are, in other words, further complicating any attempts to reduce risk to sustainable development and demanding approaches to risk and sustainability that can take into account such complexity and dynamics. Hence, this chapter intends to present an overview of the main types of symptomatic events that undermine sustainable development, as well as the major processes of change continuously transforming our risk landscape. I will not go into all the detailed text again from the chapter, but I will use key figures from the book and from the AR6 IPCC report and some additional more updated figures, because the book is a bit old, so you can see number of deaths from 2004. We will come back and look at deaths from more recent numbers. So this will add some value to what the book wants to do. The different kinds of symptomatic events can be categorized in a multitude of ways based on their magnitude, frequency, speed of onsets, etc. However, for the purpose of this book, I chose to present them organized after the processes that initiate them. So hydrometeorological events, climate change mostly, but also natural floods, droughts, heavy rain, landslides, geologic events, so earthquakes, volcanoes, biological events could include terrorism, but anoxia, hypoxia that we talked about, invasive species, accidental events, and antagonistic events. However, none of these types of events would be of any significance if they would not involve something that we as humans value, nor if that is not adversely affected by them. So it's about us. We are worrying about sustainability in this case, and that automatically must mean biodiversity conservation, something good for the planet, but yet the focus is always on us. Not a bad thing, it's just that we have evolved to be a species that must worry about ourselves somehow all the time, right? So again, I won't list all the kinds of events that or symptomatic events that the book goes through. We will capture the most salient points necessary for proceeding with the course. So you can always go back and read the book if you feel something is missing in the way I'm summarizing it. For instance, a landslide happening in the heart of Brooks Range in northern Alaska, far away from any human activity or property, would not be noticed regardless of size. So we only worry about events that affect us. Nor is the measles virus considered a problem in Sweden as a result of effective public health programs. So it's about risk that affects you and risk that you manage before it affects you, right? In other words, so Sweden may not worry about it, but it continues to kill thousands of people in Uganda. In other words, for an event to have any significance for sustainable development, it requires at least one thing humans value, which is vulnerable to the impact of the event and a hazard to set such an event in motion. So obviously we'll look at more on hydrometeorological events from the IPCC report. Heavy precipitation is included there as well, but you can look at the map here of flood events for 2000 to 2010. Areas flooded at least once. Unfortunately, the figure is not super clear, but there are blue areas here, a lot here in Nepal, Himalayan foothills, many here in South America on the windward or windward side of the Andes and so on. So we talk about types of floods. We'll discuss a bit more in the next podcast. Pluvial flood caused by insufficient drainage from local topographical lows, so mostly river flows and heavy flows from streams and so on. Fluvial flood caused by too much water in a water course, could be streams and rivers as well. So this is more about topographical lows. This is just about existing channels getting too much water through them. Coastal flood caused by storm surge, tsunami, landslides, land subsidence or sea level rise. So it's seawater coming in. Groundwater flood caused by groundwater rising and reaching the surface, can happen because of various types of hydrological events. Breaching flood caused by water breaching natural or man-made retention barriers like dam collapse that happened in 2023 in Libya and killed a lot of people, but they got the annual amount of rain in about 6 hours, even though people blamed dam maintenance as one of the causes. It was a mud and brick dam that was designed for the rain rates they expect. The Mediterranean cyclone that smashed into it is very much caused by the warming that's happening over there. It's a hotspot for warming, so it wasn't designed for such a massive rainfall amount in any case, so maintenance probably would not have helped in any way. So Cherrapunji in India gets an annual average of 12,000 millimeter and holds the world record of 26,461 millimeter rain in 1 year and 9,300 millimeter in 1 month. And then the question is whether this is decreasing, increasing, and it's not just the amount that matters, right? If you have 12,000 millimeters on the annual average, but you get 9,300 millimeter in 1 month, or a meter in 24 hours, then you're going to have lots of issues. So that's what climate change does. It loads the dice. So events that are supposed to happen, let's say once in 10 years, begin to happen more often, like once in 5 years or once in 2 years, like Pakistan is getting flooded every year now since 2010, and here is a flooded Kenyan village in 2006, and you can see it's not necessarily caused by land use change. Deforestation would have happened, but you can see that just heavy rain is a big cause and driving main factor. Of course, drainages and natural hydrological structures may have been altered and made less effective, and so on and so forth. So we are increasing greenhouse gases, increasing hydrometeorological events in that sense, and land use change is amplifying the impact of those hydrometeorological events caused by our greenhouse gas increases. Where the impacts happen, of course, is also something to worry about, because Kenya and India are not historically big contributors to increased greenhouse gases, but they face the impacts in any case, right? So we'll come back and look at the endless floods of Pekin as one of the examples, a good example of how human land use and extreme events begin to combine over time. So a lot of this is going to be about unintended consequences of our activities, which may seem okay or fine in one era, but over time, as we kept increasing greenhouse gases and continue to increase greenhouse gases, those old decisions come back to haunt us with all kinds of events that we didn't plan for or we didn't even expect. So the question is then, where does it lead us to in the future, and what kind of decisions are needed to avoid these disasters, not only in the future but in the decisions we make now for the future, right? So we'll come back and discuss.